The Silver Screen Project.
Welcome to the Silver Screen Project, where we look back at a series of films in anticipation of an exciting new cinema release.
In preparation for Christopher Nolan's new film Oppenheimer, we went back and watched his first big budget film Memento, and now we've gone back and watched his other war film Dunkirk from 2017. Had you seen Dunkirk before?
I have, yeah. I've seen it. I saw it in the cinema, and I think I've seen it since. When we were watching it, me and Amy, she said that we'd watched it together, but I don't have a memory of that. But yeah, I've seen it at least once in the cinema, and yeah, I really like this film. I think it's good. I think it's tense, it's exciting, it's quite heartbreaking at times. It's not a perfect film. There's things that I don't love about it. It's got an interesting structure, but some of that doesn't work fully for me. And it's actually more linked to Oppenheimer than we thought, because of course it stars Oppenheimer's evil twin brother, the murderous, what was he called? Joseph Oppenheimer.
Joseph Oppenheimer.
Posing as a British naval officer in this.
Yeah. It's got a couple of people that are going to be in Oppenheimer.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
But how do you feel about this film?
So I didn't see this in cinema, which I
Okay.
do kind of regret, because I think it would have been quite a thing. I do really like this film. I don't love it. I think there's I think part of me thinks it's a bit overrated.
Fair
in
enough.
that you see lots of reviews and stuff giving like 10 out of 10 film of the year,
no.
best war film ever.
No.
And I was like, I like a lot of this film. I don't love it. So it's kind of hard to criticize, because it's like, it's not that I don't like any of it. So I like a lot of it.
Yeah.
I found it hard to find negatives. I was like, I don't love this, but I don't really have any negatives.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I kind of scrambled and just dug out bits at the end, like someone would do in a war, when they were no, but yeah, I didn't like collect bits along the way that I didn't like, but I just overall I've got some kind of general bits. But the things I do like I think the opening is really strong. I think that whole scene where there's barely any dialogue, there's a little bit of like on glaze, and he goes through and all of that. It feels like a one shot, and it's like what, like 2 years, a year or two before 1917. Damn it.
Yeah.
Which has similar vibes to that opening scene.
It's great because it really like gets you in kind of setting the scene where like there's kind of chaotic gunfire and you realise they're like desperately trying to escape.
Well, even before that, it's like complete silence with the things coming down. Yeah, and then
but you see the flyers and you're like, oh shit. And then when he gets out to the beach and the camera almost opens up and you see thousands of people just queuing and you're like, oh shit. Like,
because you see,
this is the situation.
The text kind of tells you what's going on, and then very quickly it shows you like almost the reality of it. And I feel like even on that beach scene there, there's so much storytelling going on. There's like the guy who turns out to be the French soldier who's posing, who's burying him. There's that, but there's even just like when the bombing runs come across and everyone scatters, and then like everyone just kind of goes back to what they were doing. Yeah. And you see that on the pier and stuff later, but it's just like, it shows how used to it they all are. It's
it's kind of like that snafu thing that originated the Vietnam War, the situation all fucked up.
Yeah.
Which is like, things are chaos. I think one thing that is interesting, like you kind of mentioned it then, that kind of goes on throughout the film, is kind of the lack of dialogue throughout.
Yeah.
Like Christopher Nolan is kind of known for having several like exposition scenes in his films where you have Michael Caine sitting down and explaining what's happened so far. Whereas in this, like the storytelling tells itself. When you've got it's kind of, so it's a three-pronged
you have
story.
Kenneth Branagh kind of doing a bit of that role, but nowhere near as heavily as the other one. Three-pronged story, and three timelines as well, which
so you've got the beach, you've got Mark Rylance on the boat, you've got Tom Hardy in the air, land, sea and air. I think it's a great storytelling device.
I like that. I think the thing that confused me at first when I first saw it is because the place is called the Mole, like the end of the dock thing. And that's a bit confusing, because if you don't know what that means, and they don't explain that for about 20 more minutes, you're then thinking, who's a mole in this situation? And then it says the sea one day, and you go, okay, so that's the mole, this is the sea. And then when it says the air, you're like, okay, so I feel like that could have been slightly clearer, and they probably should have just said land. But then I guess because it's mostly set on the dock, But yeah, overall, I think that Land, Sea and Air and the timelines thing, where you see little previews of what's happening in Tom Hardy's storytelling, because
Yeah.
you see like the oil on the boat and you see certain little things. I feel like some of that is quite effective in kind of just teasing and kind of confusing you a little bit and then relaying it. There are bits I don't love about that.
Yeah,
Which,
no, I think it's quite cool because Christopher Nolan loves messing with time.
yeah,
It'd be awful if he ever had a time machine because he would just mess around with it constantly. But yeah, it's like the land stuff's a week and the boat is a day and the plane's an hour.
That's right.
And it's it's really well written, so you are jumping between the three, but it never seems like you're focusing on one too much.
No,
and they all kind of come to an end together.
Yes, which is very Memento, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, and it comes together, and you're like, they've all kind of been at different paces reaching this same point, and it's cool. And then it kind of has the epilogue after with them getting back to England.
Yes,
which I thought was
I think
quite nice.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. It's very like obviously pro allies, because I don't think you can really be pro Axis in any kind of way, but you know, it feels very like patriotic and British, and British film made by British people, which, you know, it's fine. I mean, Churchill himself, obviously not a great guy, most people would know, but him having the main guy, who we don't even really get his name, I think
it's Tommy.
I think it might be a very British soldier name from what but him reading that out from the newspaper is quite an effective way of doing that. And
I feel like it's another film that I did like, that I think was a bit more egregious in doing that, was the Gary Oldman. I can't remember what it was called. The Gary Oldman one where he plays Churchill.
I'm Churchill. Look at me.
And that kind of peaks. It's telling the same story, but from his perspective. I feel like that was a lot more like, oh yeah, look
Darkest Hour.
Whereas this, I feel like it tells like a genuinely like interesting and fascinating story.
I think also the elements, we spoke a little bit about the different the three timelines. I think having the C one as civilians going on this little mission, and them doing it of their own accord, and Mark Rylance being like, we're just gonna go and do it, and the you know, the most heartbreaking bit of all, George coming with them and them saying we're off to war, George, and then obviously that doesn't go particularly well for him. But having that kind of civilian point of view is, I think, really important, because although most of the people we meet are very human characters, it's just a different perspective of the whole affair. I think it makes it more interesting.
It's really interesting, that different perspectives, because even within kind of the military, you get a different perspective, because Kenneth Branagh's like a high-ranking person. You've got the privates who are just running around like scared most of the time. And then you've got Tom Hardy, who's just like, he's not a major rank, but like he's just professional and he's determined. Like elite.
Yeah, I think some of the dogfighting stuff is just really effective, because it's really calm and it's really kind of calculated. It's fast paced, but it's do you know what I mean?
It's not confusing.
It feels like you're in like a simulator, and you know, when they line up the crosshairs, and they're, you know, especially when there's still a couple of them in the air, and they're kind of I don't know any of the terms, but they're pulling the other one across in front. And it's all very like, you know, get a couple of shots off, you see the smoke come out. There's a couple of moments where you're just like, we really get someone.
It is a bit of like a fist pump in the movie.
It's more some of the most action in this, really, because there's some bombing and stuff, and there's moments, you know, of like escaping from the boat when he gets hit by the torpedo and stuff, which I think is a very tense scene, but it's not
there's no like frontline shooting at another enemy. It's mostly getting attacked.
Very interesting that the only enemy soldiers that you see are I think they look like Nazi guys who turn up and get Tom Hardy right at the end.
That was I think it was one of my one of my trivia was that they're the only German soldiers seen in the entire film, and they're blurred out because they're focused on Tom Hardy. It's a really interesting
it is because you see that and then you go, oh yeah, okay,
because like you're just focusing on the British and the French sitting there on the beach, and it's like, oh yeah, we don't actually need to show the enemy to be scared of the enemy, sort of thing.
It's very, very interesting, very clever. And that shot of Tom Hardy in front of the burning Spitfire is like feels like a classic Nolan shot. Just really.
There's some the cinematography in this is throughout. You mentioned that shot of Tom Hardy at the end. It's great. Some of the ones.
Did I say Tom Holland just then?
I don't
I
know.
might have done. Well,
You can't
let me
remember.
know.
But yeah, some of it, just like all the people squeezed onto the boats,
Yeah.
or
All on the pier, going up to
all
the
on the
mole
pier.
bit.
Yeah, it looks amazing.
And there's a couple of IMAX shots, like when Tom Hardy's doing the kind of gliding at the end, where his engine's out.
Yeah.
There's some great sweeping shots of the beach where you can see people all kind of filing away. And
yeah,
it
and then
just looks
also
really cool.
the kind of the camera panning as Tom Hardy flies by at the end, and everyone's just like cheering.
Yeah.
You just see rows and rows of people like going on forever.
I do wonder. I mean, I really like that bit where he's just making the most of the airtime he's got, and he takes out that bomber at the end.
Yeah.
That's one of the real moments, like you say. But I do wonder why he didn't turn around and go kind of land closer to where everyone else was. He seems to just carry on down.
I think it's because there's thousands of people on the beach, and he needed like a big area to land. I guess.
Yeah, I feel like I don't. Christopher Nolan is not the kind of director that would be like, hey, he's going to say something, but you know, maybe Tom Hardy going to say, no space to, I don't know, because it just seems a little bit, or land in the sea like the other guy did. It just seems like an unnecessary.
Yeah.
He just keeps flying for like miles to go across. But.
One thing I did really appreciate is the historical accuracy of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Like the films like this, like war films, can quite often be like exaggerated or telling new stories and stuff.
Have like a new hero that does a load of
stuff, but like everything in this film, I think I saw like the one thing that they weren't actually accurate is that the dogfights are actually higher in the air than what we see.
Oh, okay, right. But, like, so even those parts are
but like even like the characters we see are like based on real people or a combination of people. Like Mark Rylance's character was based on a guy who was on the Titanic, who took his yacht over to Dunkirk, like
right, interesting.
Just took it himself. And even like at the end when he got back, they were amazed at how many people he could fit on there.
Okay, cool.
And I was like, oh, they've taken like real stories.
Yeah.
I think there was a couple of pilots that did what Tom Hardy did and like used the last of their petrol just to clean sweep the things. Cool. And it's like, yeah, I appreciate that, because it's like, when you've got kind of a cool story with loads of cool things happening, you don't need to make shit up.
Yeah, try and use as much as you can if there is interesting stuff. Yeah, I think there's lots of great moments in this that we haven't mentioned. I think Kenneth Branagh, one of the most kind of emotional moments, other than the Barry Keoghan. I've forgotten.
Keogh?
Yeah, I always said Keogh, and then I looked it up last night, and it's more like Keegan.
Right.
Anyway. But other than that, which we could talk about in a sec, the Kenneth Branagh moment where, because they've reinforced this home's only over there, you can almost see home, and then there's the bit with all the dots on the horizon, and he lifts up and it's really tense and the music's building, and then as he brings his binoculars down, he's got tears in his eyes, and the guy's like, what can you see? And he's like, home.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah.
Kenneth Branagh's great. And then obviously he then decides to stay to get
I like the other guy's just like, okay, bye. Just jumps on the boat.
Old Jarvis from Agent
Jarvis,
Cart.
yes, yeah. I did think as well, although that's a very emotional moment, based on the direction he's looking, surely it's very likely that it is going to be the boats they asked for and not just lots and lots of Nazi boats coming to get them. Because he sees when he looks across, because he's worried at first and it's this tense thing, but he's looking towards, Dorset, towards Dover, and it's lots of little boats. Surely as a Navy guy, you'd have a bit of an idea.
Yeah,
that
maybe
he's
just concerned and
he's
scared.
Just on edge. But,
another thing that I thought was great, obviously Hans Zimmer did the score,
yes.
which he does in a lot of Nolan films. It's excellent.
Yeah.
They're like increasing tension throughout the film, and the constant ticking that goes throughout. It creates this huge tension. Even when there's scenes that like seem pretty chill, you're just constantly feeling tense throughout like, the hour and a half of this.
Kind of the ticking is like you say, almost constant, and it fades sometimes to almost inaudible, like Christopher Nolan's dialogue. And and then it swells, and there's little ticking motifs. Yeah, it's very, very effective, and it reminded me a little bit of one of the things that seeing Paranormal Activity in the cinema that made it so scary was there's this weird kind of, it's almost like that background, not a brown noise, it's a bit like a brown noise, it's like a deep kind of hum, and they would play it during the scenes where it's the night vision at night, and they'd build that up, and it really, really actually effectively with the surround sound really made you feel on edge. And I feel like they used the ticking in a similar way in there.
Yeah, I read, I don't think it's my trivia, but that was actually Christopher Nolan's stopwatch that he ticked and recorded it and sent that to Hans Zimmer and been like, use this. Yeah, I think there's lots of tense bits. I think one particularly tense bit was when they're all hiding on the boat.
Yes.
And the shots just coming in and they're like,
yeah,
we need to be quiet. And then they're like, get rid of this guy, he's a German spy. And you're just like on edge the whole time.
Because it's like we've seen from the introduction of that character that something's a bit off with him. You see that he's wearing the boots of the dead guy, and that's a bit like something's going wrong here. But he's helped them out, like on the boat when the torpedo hit. He opened the door, I think, didn't he? Or something like that. Harry Styles' character is a bit of a twat in this, to be honest. I don't think he really redeems himself.
No.
Maybe with the oily boys bit. I don't really know.
Not as much as like Cillian Murphy kind of not redeems himself, but has remorse.
Yeah, and I think there's that moment with him where the guy lies to him about George. So the George bit, I think, is it's my favorite kind of little mini story, because it's the kind of thing where, because he just gets bashed on the head, and it's not like a big dramatic thing. And just like the reveal when he's just, the guy's like, oh, come on, we need you up there in a bit. And he's like, I can't see. And it's just like, I remember getting really affected by that in the cinema.
When the other guy says to the soldier, oh, watch him. And he's like, he's dead, mate. Yeah, and you're just like, your
and
heart
he's just
drops.
and he goes, yeah, I know, be careful of it. Because he's just putting on this front, and it's, and then he lies to Cillian Murphy saying, oh yeah, he's fine, don't worry. And then he sees the stretcher taking him off. He disappears into the crowd.
I think it's like with Cillian Murphy's character, like Mark Rylance mentions that he's got like shell shock and stuff, and it's like he clearly is being affected.
You can see him be such a different character earlier on when you saw him as well. Yeah,
and it's like you can see why he's being affected, and like you feel sorry for him, even though he's accidentally killed a man. You're like, man, that's so unfortunate for him.
It was clearly an accident, and if anyone escaping war wouldn't want to be on the first boat back to the place you just escaped from. So I can understand his perspective there.
That's most of what I've got. Like I said, I haven't really got anything negative to say, apart from I think it's probably slightly overrated.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I feel like I don't know exactly what it is, because I feel like it's something around the end of the timelines coming together. Something didn't feel fully right to me, and I think it's because when all the boys on the beach are in the boat, it's very unclear how it gets from there to them with like the oil spill. And I feel like you see them being rescued with the oil before we see them fully leave the beach. There's something about the timing of that.
No, that confused me slightly as well.
I really like the reveal that the main guy is alive, because he's the one being dragged along and the oil washes off him and you see. I think that's really, really effective and works really well. But we see like Harry Styles' character and the bit he's dead, mate kind of thing, I think is before the boats even got off the beach. So I think there's a little bit of editing that maybe, Christopher Nolan's normally very good at it. I'm sure there's an intentional message there or whatever, but it just didn't fully land for me.
I think it's not as much of a problem with Tom Hardy's storyline, because he doesn't interact with any other characters.
There is a bit of a confusing bit where I think he shoots that last plane like after we already know they've escaped or something. There's something that's a bit, but it doesn't matter. Oh no, maybe it's they've all escaped and then we see him landing, which is obviously like a day before or whatever, however long it took them to get across but it's just like, it is what it is. Yeah, I think there's, just before we finish off, I think like there's a couple other funny moments, like, well, not funny. I was about to say funny moments, like George being in the paper at the end is like a nice cap off. Because he said he wanted to be in the paper to show his dad or whatever, and it's just like,
and it's quite sweet, because obviously you could easily just feel it with like war heroes and stuff, and it's like he didn't go to fight in the war, but
no, and the fact it was this like split second decision that he just leapt on the boat at the end, I felt really like, the guy who wakes up and thinks he's missed all the boats, like that would suck so much.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, we're over here, officers." And also I noticed that the train seats seem to be exactly the same as the ones we have nowadays. So British trains haven't changed much since 1940.
I did like the whole like they thought they were going to get like spat on and ashamed, and then he looks up and there's a guy like handing over beers because the public have been told that it's a great evacuation.
I think watching it this time, I really didn't empathize with Harry Styles' character at all, because I just remembered him trying to force the guy out into the. So him being like, "Oh, we ran away." I'm like, "Well, you're a little twat anyway, so you can fuck off."
I still kind of had some sympathy for him because he's panicking,
I just came at it the wrong way.
I think I saw as well that Christopher Nolan purposely cast like young, unknown actors that hadn't been in stuff because that's the sort of people that are at the beach.
There's a couple of the faces.
Obviously, Harry Styles stands out because he's Harry Styles.
There's a couple of faces that you kind of recognise from other British stuff, but just as like that British guy or whatever. Like a couple of the guys in the boat with them. Like one of them is in like Game of Thrones at some point, and the main guy is in Bandersnatch, the Black Mirror thing, which I looked up afterwards. But he's not casting, Cillian Murphy as one of these kids hiding on the boat. No, exactly, because they would be like 18 to 20-year-old kind of guys.
So I've got a few bits of trivia. One of them was talking about the fact we don't see any German troops. I read that this movie was shot on the actual beach at Dunkirk where the evacuation took place. Okay. I think I read that they were looking at shooting locations and visited the beach, and they were like, actually, this worked. We could shoot here. It's a really big, wide, sandy beach, so it worked for filming anyway.
Yeah.
And I think I saw when they were like looking around the beach, Christopher Nolan found a button buried in the sea from like a World War II uniform.
Wow, okay.
And it was like, okay, that may have washed up or something. Just happened to be when he's there. Yeah. The other one trivia I got is that according to Kenneth Branagh, roughly 30 Dunkirk survivors who in their mid-90s attended the premiere in London.
Yes.
When asked about the movie, they felt that it accurately captured the event, but the soundtrack was louder than the actual bombardment. A comment that greatly amused Christopher Nolan.
Yep, sounds about right. I always wonder this when like veterans go to see war films about any war, but let alone the war they were in.
Yeah.
Do you wonder how like triggering that could be for like PTSD?
I remember some with Schindler's List, like some Auschwitz survivors like visited the set and stuff because obviously Spielberg was making it and was so horrified at seeing Ray Fiennes that like it nearly like broke them down.
Yeah.
And he had to be like, I'm sorry, I'm not really this guy.
Yeah. God.
So I mean, we're gonna get less and less of it, really, aren't we? Because these people were in their mid-90s.
Yeah, and it was 6 years ago now.
Yeah, so
we
it's not going to be long until we've got no World War II veterans left.
No.
Which is it's sad in a way, but it's kind of nice that it was so long ago.
It's the passage of time, isn't it? There's only so. Yeah, we had. I met her. I can't remember if she was actually in Auschwitz, but I met a Holocaust survivor. One time she goes around and does talks in schools. Yeah, she's very old, as you can imagine, but she was very young at the time. Yeah.
Fair play. So apart from memorializing World War II, the only thing left to do is ask whether this got you more or less hyped for Oppenheimer.
Yes, it definitely got me more hyped. Yes. I do wonder, because going into watching Dunkirk for the first time, I was wondering what the Nolan-y twist was going to be, and the only real twist on it is the 3 timelines. So I really, really wonder if there'll be anything similar with Oppenheimer. And I think we've spoken before about maybe they'll be doing a timeline thing. I think the trailer has 1 or 2 shots in black and white, so that might be a Memento.
Imagine if they did it like Memento.
Yeah, they might do it backwards. To be fair, from explosion, but
they could easily like cut it with like post-war stuff, like post-war discussions around it.
That's what I feel.
Cut back to like it going on, because
there's definitely a bit in that. Well, first of all, do you want to answer the question? Because I just stopped.
Let's say yes for the same reasons you.
So I've only seen the teaser trailer, the one that I played in the cinema like 6 months ago or whatever, and I'm fairly sure it had what looked like kind of courtroom Senate kind of stuff and that was in black and white. So that makes me
Right.
think that is the post-war, or at least well, it would be post-war, post-explosion. And I don't know anything about the story in reality, but if there is any kind of what's the
Repercussions?
word? Repercussions. I was going to say recompressions. If there's
That's what they do with the bomb.
if there's any repercussions legally or anything like that, or ethically or morally, maybe that'll be something that's explored with a dual narrative thing.
Yeah, interesting.
I mean, I'll be finding out very soon about this. So.
Yeah, I won't say anything, but yeah, I think that's an interesting.
That's a possibility.
Maybe, but maybe not the way you think.
Okay, cool. But yeah.
But yeah, that brings us to the end of this silver screen project. Hopefully you enjoyed it. The next one we will be doing will be Oppenheimer, as we've been building up to this. It comes out very shortly for us. So we'll release that as soon as we can.
Yeah, and if you like this, check out the project on the same podcast channel. Bye.